Hi everyone, I'm Katrina Walser from Oliphant Kat, and if we haven't met before, I am a knitting teacher and designer based in Sydney in Australia. But if we have met before, then welcome back. I'm glad you could join us today. So I'm here today with a tutorial on how to do mosaic knitting. So the previous two videos have been building up to this. Mosaic knitting is my favorite kind of color work to do. I am not the best at doing two-stranded color work or fair isle or whatever it is you want to call it. But I do really love doing mosaic knitting. And so mosaic knitting is a specific type of color work that is relatively new in the world of knitting. As far as I can tell, it was invented in the 60s by a woman named Barbara G. Walker, who published an amazing series of stitch dictionaries and just books and resources and things. If you haven't seen her books before and you are interested in seeing lots of interesting and different stitch patterns, I would definitely recommend checking her work out. Mosaic knitting is a subset of slip stitch knitting. It's a particular type of slip stitch color work that it is essentially just slip stitch knitting. So if you have seen the previous videos on how to do that, then you have all the techniques that you need to actually do mosaic knitting. And I will put a link to those videos up here so you can go check them out first if you don't already know how to do slip stitch knitting. But mosaic knitting follows a particular set of rules and it uses a special type of chart. So let's just go ahead and I will show you how to do mosaic knitting. So first off, I'm going to give you a quick crash course in how you read charts in general. And we are going to actually use the chart that I was looking at in the last video. So to read a chart, each of these boxes is a stitch of your knitting and the row is a whole row. And so the way that you know where to even start is that you always start at the bottom and you work your way up. And the side that the row number shows up on tells you which direction that you're knitting in. So in this case, I'm going to start here on the right and work my way this way. And if it's on the right side, that means you're doing a right side row. And once I get to the end of that row, I go up to the second row and I turn my work and I work back the other way. And because you're reading it from left to right, that means that it's a wrong side row. And you keep going up and back like that. And the way you read the little boxes is that they always have a symbol inside of them. And there, somewhere in the pattern, there will be a key that shows you what that symbol means. So in this particular case, a blank square that's just a color means knit one using that color. And the little V shape means slip one. So in this particular case, you would knit and then slip and then knit and then slip and then knit and then slip and so on and so forth down the row. The last piece that I have to show you is what these red lines mean, and those are repeat lines. So the way you would read this is that you can use this chart on more than 9 stitches. What you do is that you knit the first 2 stitches in the row and then you do the stuff that's in between the red lines over and over again. So it's a repeat. That's how you read a chart. Now, if we look at our mosaic charts, and I'm actually going to show you, so this is the book that I mentioned in the intro. It's by Barbara G. Walker. And if you look at the charts, there's 2 main differences between a mosaic chart and a normal knitting chart. So first off, there are no symbols. All of the stitches are just colors, because in mosaic knitting, you're only ever working with 2 colors at a time, unlike in the previous video where we were working with 3. And then the other thing is that in a regular chart, you have only 1 number on either end, but in a mosaic knitting chart, you have a number on both sides of the row, and that's how you know it's a mosaic knitting chart. So the way that you read these is that you take a look at the first stitch in each row, and that tells you which color you'll be knitting with, and you'll notice that it is always alternating. So in mosaic knitting, you are always doing 2 rows of one color and then switching to the other row and then doing 2 rows of the next color and so on and so forth. So you start off and you figure out which color you're using, and every box or every stitch that you come to that is in that color, you knit that stitch. And then if you come to a stitch that is the other color, you slip the stitch. So in this particular case, because we are using our black strand, we're going to knit all of these stitches, and then we'll slip this one, and then we'll knit this one, and then slip this one, and then knit it. And coming back the other way, you do something special on the wrong side rows. So let's talk about that in a sec. So I just set up the first couple of rows. They are just plain stockinette stitch. And so in my particular case, the black stitches are going to be this blue color, and the white stitches in the chart are going to be this dark blue. So I look at row 1, and I'm starting with a black square, so I know I need to use this yarn. So I'm going to add on my second color here. And if you don't know how to do this, then go watch the video about stripes, because we go over how to do that there. Okay, so for the first 10 stitches, I'm going to be knitting with my contrast color. And then on the 11th stitch, you slip this stitch because it is the other color than the color that you started with. So slip. And then the 12th stitch you knit, and then the 13th stitch you slip. 12, 13. And then, because we have a repeat, you go back around to the start here, and you follow this pattern again. And then on the last stitch, we knit, because it's black. And that's our first row. Okay, so on the wrong side rows, you can actually just ignore the chart. So let's put this over here so we don't get distracted. So the rule is, on the wrong side rows, if the color of the stitch on your needle is the color that you're using, you purl it. And then on the next stitch, because it's the other color, you slip it. And like we talked about in the last video, make sure when you slip it that you slip it with the yarn in front, because we are on the wrong side row. And then we have a light blue stitch, so we're going to purl it. And then we have a dark blue stitch, so we're going to slip it. And then all of these light blue stitches we are going to purl. And then we've hit a dark blue stitch, so we slip it. And then we purl. And then we slip. And then we're going to purl all the way to the end. Alright, and we've done our first 2 rows. So now we are going to go on to row 3. And so because this first stitch is white, then that means that I'm switching to the dark blue strand. And so this time we knit the white stitches because they match the first stitch in the row, and we slip the black ones. And so for the right side rows, it doesn't matter what's on your needles, just follow the chart. So knit the first stitch, and then slip the next one because it's black, and then knit all of these because they're white and they match the first stitch. And then slip this next stitch, and then knit this one because it's matching. And then we've hit our red line, so go back to this red line here and do that all again. And then on the last stitch, because it matches the color that we're working with, then you knit it. And then going back the other way, again, ignore your chart. And now we start actually paying attention to the stitches that are on our needles. So if it is the color that you are working with, then purl it. And if it's the other color, slip it with the yarn in front. So these are all dark blue and they match what I'm using, so I'm going to purl them. And then this one's the opposite color, so I slip it, and again I purl, and I slip, and I keep going all the way down. And that's it. Those are the first 2 rows of my mosaic knitting chart. After that, you just keep doing what you've been doing, and you just alternate which color you're using at the beginning of every row. So a couple of gotchas that I've noticed when I've taught this to people before. First off, just make sure that on the right sides you're paying attention to the chart, and on the wrong sides you're paying attention to the stitches. The thing that I find confuses people sometimes is because they've come back on the wrong side row and they've been paying so much attention to the stitches on their needles, when they get to the right side row, they start knitting the chart and what's happening on here isn't actually matching the stitches on their needles already, and they get a little bit confused. So definitely just remember, when you're working on the right side, it doesn't matter what color any of the stitches that are on your left-hand needle are, just follow what's in the chart, and on the wrong side, follow the stitches on your needle. And then the other thing that you can forget easily is which color is the main color and which color is the contrast color, because mosaic knitting charts are usually black and white. And so one fun idea that I had from someone who I was teaching how to do this was she suggested that you could color all the white squares in so they match the color that you're using for the, in this case, main color. And that way it would be a little bit easier to remember which color's which. So one other thing I did want to mention, you can do mosaic knitting in the round, but it isn't standard and it's a little bit different to what I was describing here. So just follow what the pattern says. And then another few things that I wanted to show you are that there are lots of different options with mosaic knitting. First off, because it's color work, you can get very different looks based on what colors you choose. So this here is a swatch that I did of this chart here, and it's very clear, it's very defined, and we had this like very sort of plain neutral grey and then the cool sort of speckly brown as the two colors. But this here is exactly the same chart and it looks very different. So the brown is the same brown here, but the background color is also speckly, and so it gives you a very different look. I've shown these swatches to different people and everyone has different opinions on which ones they like better, so you can decide. I personally like this one better. And this is actually a pattern that I'm working on called the Traveling Bolero. It will be out in the next couple of weeks. And I've actually got it on my needles right now. And so what I wanted to show you with this is how important it is to actually block your work. This is what I'm working on at the moment. As you can see, it's like hard to see the pattern. It's just not as clearly defined. But once you block it, it just straightens out, the stitches even out, it becomes a lot more flat and rectangular, and you can very clearly see the pattern defined as opposed to this, which is a bit of a mess. So definitely block your work when you are done. But if you're knitting a garment, make sure you do a swatch before you knit and block your swatch before you measure your gauge, because mosaic knitting tends to grow after you've finished blocking it. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you is that you can do some really cool things with both the patterns and the textures. This is like, you know, it's a mosaic, but this here is very clearly a picture. So this is just something I was playing with. I might actually try and make something out of it for Christmas because I think it's fun. But the interesting thing here is the texture. So when you slip a stitch, it will always look like a knit stitch. But for all of the other stitches, the ones that you're working with, there's no reason that that has to be stockinette. So for this swatch here, what I did is on the right side, I did what I showed you, but on the wrong sides, I actually knit the stitches instead of purling them. And so that gives you more of a garter stitch effect. So there are lots of different options and different patterns will tell you to do different things. But if you ever manage to find a book or something of mosaic knitting patterns, there's lots of different options you can do. Definitely try playing with the texture and the colors and things, and you can get lots of different looks. All right, so now you know all about how to do mosaic knitting, and I hope that it is interesting looking enough that you're tempted to go out and try it, because it really is quite fun. I just find it quite relaxing and a lot of fun to work up, and the things that you can produce look so much more complicated than they actually are to knit, which is always a plus in my books. So if you are interested in trying out your new skills, I do have a pattern, the Building Blocks Baby Blanket, which is a baby blanket. And one of the most fun things about this pattern is that I figured out how to knit names in mosaic knitting. And so that's all I have for you. I hope this has been really informative and helpful, and you are interested in exploring the world of mosaic knitting now. And I would love to see your project. So if you do make anything with mosaic knitting, either one of my patterns or one of the many, many other beautiful patterns you can find out there, then please let me know. You can tag me on Instagram. I am at Oliphant Kat. But until then, happy knitting.